Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Carl Carlson.
Hey, Carl, we got an interesting question the other day, and I sent you the thread, so I think you're up to speed on the back and forth that Samantha and I did. And I did talk to Chris about this recently, but I wanted to talk to you, and our schedule prevented us from getting together sooner, is because I know that you've had to either present the results of an FMEA or explain it to other people or have advised other people to do this. And this is the first time I had that question. To me personally is, well, how do you, anyway, Samantha asked that I'm a new reliability engineer or something like that. And my boss asked me for, I don't remember the exact phrase. I don't have it in front of me, but it was like eye-popping, stunning chart. And at the first message, didn't even talk about it being an FMEA. And I'm like, well, I went straight to value. I went straight to saying, well, unless it's a really cool failure analysis picture or some strange fungus growing on, some connector, start with, well, what's the problem? What do you do to solve it? You and the team do to solve it. And what's the impact? What's the resulting cost savings or failure rate reduction, and how much did that save you in warranty? Quantify the result. What was the value created by that activity? And the number of what it saves is the eye-popping part. And don't clutter it up with a bunch of other crap. If there's a relevant chart or graphic or whatever that conveys that same message, this is the problem, or this is, what the solution looked like, or something like that, keep it clean. The story is, we had a problem, or we saw a potential problem. Here's what we did that solved the problem or prevented the problem. And here's the result. Here's the money saved or money earned, or time saved or time earned, stuff like that. And so she said, well, I'll give that a try. And she came up with more of like a risk matrix. Apparently she found some article on a NASA website that talked about FMEAs and risk management stuff, and had a clever way of using, here's the issues that we have in the red, here's the issues we have here. And at this stage, we're just prioritizing. And here's what we plan on doing about these things, and so on. And I thought that was way better and she knew when she mentioned that this was an FMEA and only partially done, that putting the whole FMEA spreadsheet on a slide is just eye candy. That's not useful. And so we agreed on that. And, but she found a way to talk about it midstream, which I thought was creative, and that it's an ongoing process was the other part I saw there that was a nice touch. I missed that completely.
Well, I love this question. So let me just muse on it with you for a minute. First of all, my first reaction when you sent me the thread is a manager wants to get the subject of FMEA and the results on one chart. I go, wow, what a challenge that is. One eye-popping chart.
Yeah, and I also gave her a hard time because and when Chris and I talked about it in a previous podcast, I think we were in episode 975. This is the one time in almost 1,000 episodes that I have the list in front of me and I could see the other episodes. So I actually have a reference that makes sense to it, another episode.
Yeah.
But the aside apart, the idea was, my first response was, you need a new boss. They don't get it.
They don't get it, right? I remember at General Motors, one of the things I was told over and over when I have to go talk to management is, make sure you only bring one page. You never want to have more than one page with management. And that was sort of ingrained into me. And I felt a little cynical about that, to be honest, because some things are more complex than one page. But let's move beyond that. I have some thoughts about this. The different companies, and I won't mention company names, one company summarizes FMEA chart by chart. So it isn't one chart. They take one page for one of the most risky failure modes, what the cause is, what they're doing to fix it, what the status is.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically had 1 page per high risk failure mode.
So this is why it's the story is this is identified. We see it's as a problem because of either safety or it's high occurrence, and it's the problem, right? And then here's the actions, and later would be hopefully results.
Yeah. And then they would show up every so often to management and present the status. I've always taught you want, and let me do a sidebar on this. I've always taught that the FMEA team and the reliability group needs to present to management every so often, usually as part of one of their normal meetings, like a problem resolution meeting or something,
Mm-hmm.
present the highest risk issues from FMEA and keep them appraised of what the status is on those high risk issues.
Yep.
But that's not one eye-popping chart. So let me continue.
Yep.
So if you want one eye-popping chart, the best I've seen, and it's going to follow a little bit of what Samantha ended up with. And I know the NASA articles she's talking about and the systems engineering has articles. It's basically on one axis is severity and on another axis is occurrence. And then you have red, yellow, green, which is if you're doing a 1 to 5 scale on both, you have different combinations, and the green area is when severity and occurrence are low enough that it's not an issue. A yellow area is it's a likely potential issue. A red area is definitely an issue that has to be addressed. And there's different combinations of SO that gets you there, but it's on one chart.
Yep.
Then you take the high risk failure modes or even the moderate risk failure modes, and you put a dot for each one.
Yep.
Number 1, number 2, number 3.
Yep.
So you could imagine on the SO, number 1 would be a certain severity, a certain occurrence. And that's the initial. And then after you implement your recommendations, it changes. Maybe the severity changes if you're really good, or the occurrence changes, and the dot becomes from a red to a green, or red to a yellow, or from a yellow to a green. And you can put an arrow from one dot to the next dot.
Yeah, it shows the magnitude of the change. Yeah.
Yeah, depending on the magnitude of the change. And then the next failure mode, you have another dot on this one chart, and then it moves from the red area to wherever it goes. And you do those, and you have to manage the number of dots. Obviously, you don't want to be too busy, but you could imagine you could take the top 10 issues and show them on one chart and then where they ended up.
Yep.
And that's probably the only one that I can see on one single chart.
I could see that as an animation,
Oh, yeah.
Because not everything's instant of the change. It's like these changes are scheduled for 3 months from now. This is an experiment.
Beautiful.
So it's a dotted line and have things moving slowly across the chart. And
Chris would do that in a minute.
I think he's busy. Let's not get another idea to him.
Let's pass him in, because in our RAM presentation, he's done a really good job of animating this kind of thing. Not that chart, but animating things like stress strength interference and a whole bunch of other things. Yeah. An initial chart and then an animation that takes you to the final and shows you how well you've done. That would be a single chart that I would suggest for Samantha.
So that shows activity, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting there, I'm going to say, all right, you move these things and I want to know how much it cost you. And I want to know how much benefit we got out of that. I want the money. I'm channeling Greg Hutchins because he tends to talk about show me the money kind of stuff a lot, but that's where I went straight to value is, okay, you changed the failure rate or you designed it out of the product. All right. That costs us money to do, to do the failure analysis, to understand the problem, to do the design work and get it all, verified and all that other good stuff. All right. That costs us $100,000. Why did you do that? Right.
Yes.
And if it's not worth $1 million+ bucks, then you wasted our time.
Well, interesting you bring that up, Fred. Many people have tried and succeeded to a certain degree of identifying the before and after.
Mm-hmm.
financials related to FMEA. So let's work through it. So you have a failure mode that you put a certain amount of money into, and you're totally correct. So you're going to put some money into testing and design change and whatever else to fix it.
Right.
And that failure mode has a severity and an occurrence and maybe a detection. So it has certain risk. Now, the savings is going to be when that product is launched. And in order to identify the savings, you have to do, here's the word, reliability prediction. You have to take the
Well, I agree. Yeah.
Predict what it's going to be in the field.
Yeah. And if it's, use the simple example, if it's a high occurrence thing and it costs us $1 each time it fails in the field. And so by cutting that in half, we have 50% of those failures. And then you multiply it times the cost per failure that occurs.
Yes.
Right. And it's a little trickier when it's a safety related thing, but you can't claim the $20 million lawsuit that might happen because there's a probability that it would happen, not guaranteed. It gets a little more back of the envelope at some point. But the idea is that if you avoid a cost, it is a savings. See, I tend to focus on who's the audience, right? If it's the program manager and they're being really laser focused on time to market, I said, the value of this FMEA and focusing on these 10 big things is that we don't find them by accident just before launch. And let's look at our last 5 programs where we didn't do this upfront stuff. Every one of them got delayed by 3 months. And I actually had this discussion with the program manager and I asked him, so how much does it cost to keep this lab focused on this product when it gets delayed? And he was like, it's $1 million a day. It was equivalent to $1 million a day for all the engineering staff and all the program. And he said, that's not counting the opportunity costs of actually starting work on the next project. And okay, so $1 million a day. If I can cut that 3-month common delay that we get to 6 weeks, that's worth 6 weeks times $1 million a day. And he goes, right, you're right. And so I said, by organizing the team early to work on the highest hitters that are going to be there anyway, they exist in the current design. Our old process was, last minute testing and we did environmental stuff and all other stuff. And we'd find it late. And then it was severe enough, that and costly enough of a problem that we would delay the program to solve it. And he goes, you're right. Well, that's where the FMEA does, is it reduces the havoc and delays in programs because we solved them free, like Chris would say, free, easy, and cheap, or free and easy up front.
I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. So I'm just going to put out the challenge on this. FMEA is mostly a qualitative analysis. Even the occurrence rating is, because you're doing FMEAs early in product development process, you don't have hard numbers.
Oh yeah.
You might have field data, but that field data is not what you're doing the FMEA on because you've changed the design. You've added new technology and other design changes. And so you're going to make a guess on the occurrence rating that'll be qualitative. But you could convert that, in theory, you could say, I'm going to assume that that's a certain failure rate. And you could do that.
Well, I disagree with that. I start with an assumption because we do that during the FMEA. That's where the occurrence rating comes from. We go from our experience and collective wisdom on this. We think this is going to occur a lot or not. And we rank order those, but the focus is on rank order. Let's find the highest severity occurrence and so on. But once we get that top 10, then it's engineering time. It's go figure it out. Is this failure mechanism really going to occur that often or not? And let's do the due diligence. And are we solving the right problem, or do we have the right solution to solve it, and so on? And sometimes everybody agrees this will occur to every single product that goes to the field. Well, that's 100% failure rate.
That's a big one.
And so you kind of have to work on that one. And, especially when the first prototype, before FMEAs, or when you didn't do FMEAs and the first batch of prototypes come back and none of them fired up, it's like, we would have caught that,
So I don't disagree with that at all. The thing is, if we try to extract a failure rate number
right from the FMEA, no, I don't.
early in product development, that's going to be an assumption you have to make.
Either it's an assumption or you do the work to figure out a reasonable one. I find in quantifying the value type stuff, it's what's important. Is it time to market? Is it the cost of development? Is it reducing failure rate and warranty cost? Is it some other driver, right? What is it what speaks to the management team as being relevant to them? It almost always converts to dollars at some point in time. Time to market is based on, that's all the more budget we got to pay for this team to work on this thing. We better launch it then, because every day afterwards is costing us extra money. That budget has to come from someplace. And others have different priorities. So it's the value part starts with, well, what's important to the people you're talking to in terms of value, time, money, resources, and so on. And then the second part is realize that not all those management team are going to have the same priorities. And so you better, so it saves us time in development. It reduces development costs. It reduces the chance of a delayed program. It reduces field failure rate and warranty costs. You should have a whole array of that stuff thought through and can answer each one's priority as they ask those questions. Or, well, that's not important to me. I don't pay warranty. Well, do you care about your engineering time? Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, this will save you this much time. A lot of that is really back in the envelope, kind of sorted out.
Yeah, it is.
But you reveal your logic to people as you develop it and say, well, what's the average, I want to say burn rate, but that's cost of a staff engineer on the team, loaded costs with overhead and benefits and everything else. I don't need their exact salary, but what's their typical run rate for an engineer on our team? And then you just get a ballpark number. And then for each of these things, well, the failure rate's here, this is that, and the other thing, all those steps. And then as you work through that with the key people that know those numbers, they'll adjust it up or down a little bit. And what that does is it gets their buy-in to it. So that when you go to management and say, here's the consequence of this, here's the value of what this FMEA has done, you've got a step-by-step logic for each one of them, plus key people that know that information can step in. Yeah, I gave him that number because that's what we do. Or that's our cost, that's our hit rate, that's our failure rate, it's the warranty cost, whatever.
Let me agree with what I think is right about what you're saying, which is you want to characterize the results in a language that management understands, which is financial.
Usually.
And I think that's a really good thing. So let's sort of brainstorm here how we can do this on one chart. The
great big font, $8,275,000.
Really, really small font. No. So the chart, I like the idea that we're coming up with here: severity, occurrence, plot, red, yellow, green. Take maybe the top 5, just the top, whatever the number is you're going to do. And then if you can do an animation, that's fantastic. You show the before and after. Then at the bottom of the chart, you list those, say, 5 failure modes with their causes. And then you can state, based on an assumption, which you could have an asterisk, based on assuming this, we can then calculate the amount of savings.
Or cost avoidance, whatever their language is
there could be a supplementary page that says, here's the assumptions that go into this analysis.
Right.
And then you can say, okay, if we address this failure mode, we can save this amount of money, address this failure. I'm on board with that. As long as we have the assumption page. I've seen too many people go down the path of not identifying and documenting their assumptions and just saying, well, we're going to change this from a failure rate of 20% to a failure rate of 10% without showing how they get those numbers.
Yeah.
And that ends up voodoo.
Well, the other piece of this, if it's just one slide, it's a story. There has to be a narrative with it. And either the really brilliant charts tell the story all by themselves, right? Yet those are really difficult to make in any circumstance, anywhere. I'm thinking of, I'm drawing a blank. I want to say Tillman, but it's not it. He had a whole series of books about how to express yourself and how to create graphics and charts and stuff that convey their meaning in and of themselves. I'll have to look it up. but
Yeah.
the essence of it is if it comes out of Excel, it's probably not going to tell a story all by itself. It's, kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if you do that hazard plot, right, or the XY plot of severity and occurrence in red, yellow, green, and so on, and those 5 dots, each dot should have a story. This is
Yes.
what it is. This is why it's important. Here's the consensus of the team that's working on it. Here's the underlying assumptions we're making. Here's what we talked about, the options we're doing, and we chose this one, and we're working on this. That's not on the chart. You don't put a whole book on there.
I totally agree. So the eye-popping chart can be that risk matrix chart using severity and occurrence, and then showing how it changes.
Yep.
And then backup is what the economic impact is, what the impact is to the organization.
Yep.
If you make those changes. And that's a really positive result.
Yeah. So there's another piece to it. And one last thought before we wrap this up is that it's also in the language of your organization. So some teams really want ROI. They want to know what's the investment and what's our return on it and when does that return show up. They think of it more that way. Others will go, well, what's the cost to us? And they're adapted. The team is adapted at converting that cost into what's meaningful for them. Others, it's really tricky. And I know you've run into it, Carl, is the management team wants to know what's in it for them, but they're not going to ask you that overtly.
Right.
Right. But if that's their main driver for providing support for this activity, you'll get less complaints from customers. You'll be easier to sell products to new fields and new areas. It gives us engineering time to develop new products that this project that you've haven't had the resources to do yet will be available. Resources will be available to do it. And that hits on those unsaid motivations people have. And
Excellent.
so it's really, in order to make an engaging chart of any result, FMEA included, is you got to understand your audience, and you need to have the chart such that it either tells the story on its own or it comes with a clear narrative, and then it has to talk to what's important to them. It's usually money related in some form or another. That's
an excellent summary. If you're listening to this and you have an idea of how to, or experience on how to summarize an FMEA on a single chart, we'd love to hear about it. Or if you think it's not a good idea, we'd like to hear that too. And of course, if you have any other topics for us on podcasts, we're wide open.
Yeah. Well, not wide open. I got a few more in the queue here also. But we can always use more. We can always use more. We got
listening.
We got another 1,000 episodes to go. So we got plenty of room for this. I don't know when, but the idea is, let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. You can find a couple of ways to get in touch with us there. Carl, only one person's ever left us a voicemail in that system. I should go check to see if it still works.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Make sure it's there.
Yeah. And Carl and I and the other hosts are available through LinkedIn and through our about pages where there are email and phone numbers and stuff like that. So there's plenty of ways for you to get in touch. We try to get a response back to you, an answer back to you pretty quick. Keep you moving, get your job done as you're working through stuff. But also then it becomes a topic, and I almost always learn something as we chat through these things. So it's always a pleasure to get your questions.
It is.
Yeah. All right, Carl. I don't need a hazard analysis for the rest of the day. Maybe I do. I'm going into the garden.
I have an eye-popping to-do list that I have to go work on.
I call those a honey-do list. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, cool. Talk to you soon, Carl. Take care.
See you later, Fred.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.